Jable and Jables, this is Evan Dammarell, co-host of Locked On Cavs, here for once without my co-host Chris Manning. Chris went to go see BTS over the weekend and destroyed his vocal cords screaming along to my universe, so he'll be off for a bit while he recovers. In his stead is vengeance himself and 92.3 The Fan's own Mac Robinson. On today's show, we'll be talking about all things Cavs Clippers, and without further ado, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Before we get started, I just want to thank you all for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And do not forget, we're on YouTube. And if you help us get to 1,500 subscribers by Friday, like I said, I'll dry scoop a serving Athletic Greens. But more about them on Thursday and Friday's episode. They aren't paying for today's show. I already introduced them at the top, but I got to ask, Mac, how you doing today, bud?
Well, I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Bat Mac, and I'm ready to go here, man, after a great Cavs win. So I'm happy.
No, it really was a good win. I had my reservations for a little bit in the first half, I would definitely say. I am really impressed with how Ty Lue is coaching the heck out of this team and maximizing the potential of this roster, I think. It was nice to see him do media availability. I did his pregame media just to hear from him a little bit, and he gave some good thoughts on the Cavs team. He said JB should be coach of the year, which was always nice, but I think just watching this Clippers team play, we'll talk about this later in the show, but they're without Kawhi. They're probably without PG-13 for the rest of the year. I know they're back and forth on whether or not he'll play, but they're in prime position to make the play-in tournament. They could make the playoffs realistically with how well they're playing. And these are second-round picks and guys that they've just kind of developed internally. And yes, he's asking them to play above what their expected level is, but it was a fun game. And like the Cavs, on the other hand, were fun too.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, too, is that, I've been a fan of the Clippers from afar, just, again, from a general NBA sense. I love what they've been able to do. And, I mean, look, you knew how much I like Luke Kennard, too, at the trade deadline. And, between him and then also them adding Norman Powell, I was really excited about it. I know he didn't get a chance to play tonight, but and he's been out for a while. But, again, this is a team that's deep. More than anything. And I think that Ty Lue, like you said, I mean, he's done a phenomenal job with them. So I knew it was going to be a challenge coming in. But, for the Cavs to not only win, but also to cover in this game, too, I think was really a job well done by the Cavs and company.
No, for sure. And for those who are maybe listening for the first time, generally on post-game shows, we do big takeaways and we do awards and we kind of clean our notebooks in the last segment, maybe just Mac brought up an interesting debate topic. But Mac, you are my co-host on this one. You're my co-pilot, but I'm going to let you take flight first. Take us off the runway. What was one of your biggest takeaways from tonight's game?
I think that, and I don't mean to be cliche when I say this, because, I mean, again, you know me, when it comes to my takeaways, I like to at least, try to at least give you as much detail as possible and stay away from the coach speak. But, a lot of it was just winning plays, where whether it be like somebody like Dylan Windler, who, and I know just immediately jumping to him, but, somebody who didn't score, but at the same time in 12 minutes got 5 rebounds and just the poke away rebounds, finding a way to, keep those possessions alive, whether it be him, Isaac Okoro on multiple occasions, not just, able to get to the free throw line, but, able to play good defense. And on top of that, too, get some of those stronger rebounds as well. So, again, just certain cases where the Cavaliers are able to make those winning plays and just overall, a lot of those players just really making those big plays for the team.
It's weird to think about. I've talked to folks in Cleveland's front office. I talk, especially on the analytics side of things. And one of the folks in the analytics side of things did mention that they try to track winning plays, but it's hard to quantify what it is. But when you look at moments like that, like Dylan Windler really popped for me in this game because first off, he got actual minutes. That made me like raise an eyebrow. I was like, okay. I mean, Lamar Stevens just didn't look great in the second half, and JB Bickerstaff staff called Windler's number. Has not played since February 9th up to this point, so it's been more than a month since he's played for the Cavs, and really soaking up a lot of minutes of the charge. You and I have gone down and watched him a few times, talked to Dan Giroux about it, just the plan of him being played 35, 40 minutes a night and just kind of let him just get some burn in because he doesn't play that often. And like you said, he really was equipped and ready to go in this game. And coming out of Belmont, he was known for his rebounding. I think it sticks out like a sore thumb when he's with the Charge too. But like you said, didn't score in this game, but his energy and hustle kind of provided a bit of a spark for the Cavs. I think Brandon Goodwin's block really did a number for the Cavs too. Yeah, this was a fun game. Like you said, they did make a lot of winning plays, which is refreshing to see because they've kind of hit a bit of a lull coming into March.
Yeah, and that's one thing that, I feel like, and as I thought about it more and more and getting a chance to be on around the team too, like I hadn't seen that many winning plays from this team, probably since like early January or even, the pre-Rubio injury, where you saw a lot of that energy from those guys. So, for me, I looked at it and I thought, this is something that really stood out to me. And I really think that, that was one. And another player too that I think actually made an impact, despite not necessarily making it in the scoring in the point column, but at the same time, I look at Charis Levert, and even though he didn't add that much of a scoring punch, you could see the difference when he was in the ball game, and the fact that the offense, it didn't stagnate as much when you could give a little bit of rest, even on the court, to Darius Garland, with Charis Levert taking the ball up and even making some plays on the defensive end, which I really wasn't expecting with him coming in, but he played really well in the defensive end for me.
Yeah, it was good to see Levert out there playing meaningful basketball, just first and foremost, as he had a 9-game absence. But I think you're spot on just saying that the dimensions he adds to Cleveland offensively is certainly intriguing. I think he is going to be a few steps behind just from a chemistry aspect, but you can see it in real time when they're playing the Clippers. I think the Clippers kind of self-imploded a little bit down the stretch. Isaac Okoro, we'll talk about him in a second, but he really painted it out well too, that the Clippers were kind of blitz heavy on Garland. And I think having Levert as a secondary ball handler really helps a lot. And I'm intrigued to see, one, as long as he stays healthy, and thankfully he, knock on wood, looks good after this game. And two, yeah, just interested to see where it goes here. I think Philly's going to be a fun test for them. I think Levert's really going to unlock a lot of things for them, and it should be a fun game on Wednesday. But like my big takeaway is just who I was talking about a second ago, Isaac Okoro. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but this felt like one of his more complete games on both ends of the floor. Yeah, he was in foul trouble throughout the game, but he played a lot of high-impact defense. There were times he had to defend Amir Coffey. There's times he had to defend Terrence Mann. There's times he had to defend Brandon Boston. There's times he had to defend pretty much everyone on the Clippers. Just whoever was kind of hot, they threw Isaac at, and he sometimes had to play a little over-aggressively at times. But offensively, he really flipped the switch. And I know JB Bickerstaff said post-game he didn't flip a switch. He's always been wired this way. He just needs to be more aggressive on a night-to-night basis. And I think just in Cleveland's overall dichotomy and just shot profile, Isaac's a little bit of an afterthought, especially if Sexton's healthy. You say it's Garland, Mobley, Allen, Sexton, like those four guys need to get their buckets in closing moments, and maybe you just throw Isaac on there to be that high-energy defender on the opposing team's best perimeter player. But I think just his scouting analysis, when Ashley Bastock from Cleveland.com asked him about his and one he had in the closing moments, and he read it really well. He's just like, the Clippers are a team that like the blitz and heavy possessions, and that is a staple of Ty Lue's defense, is where they blitz in closing moments. And he's like, Ivica Zubac was in foul trouble, and he has a little bit of happy feet. So if you can get him in isolation and kind of force him to either try and foul you or not, it's just really refreshing to hear. I think the playmaking was certainly an unlockable aspect. I was wrong in my analysis. I had to delete it, but he almost had a career high in his assists, but was close to it tonight, which is really refreshing. I just think Okoro at this level really unlocks an apex of what the Cavs are trying to do. And this is kind of what I think they expected of him when we heard rumors, whispers, murmurs, whatever the heck you want to call it, early in the season where they considered benching Colin Sexton and starting Okoro, not just because of the defensive upside, but what he brings to the table offensively as well.
Yeah, and that's the one thing too. I think that you're spot on when it comes to, his most complete game, because I feel like you said, the fact that him getting aggressive on the offensive end, I think that opens up so much for this offense. And especially because of the fact that it forces defenses to make a decision, because at that point you either collapse and try to defend Isaac, who's super quick and has that quick first step to get to the basket, but you also have to worry about Darius on the outside. You have to worry about Lowry, who, tonight shot 4 of 6 from deep. So at that point, you have a lethal 3-point shooter that you have to keep an eye out for. So, Isaac, I think, adds another dimension to the offense. I think that we haven't really seen quite as much throughout this season. And it was one of my takeaways was the fact that, it really felt like it was purposeful and meaningful aggressiveness from Okoro. And it wasn't just, one or two plays here and there that, he tried to get aggressive. It was meaningful and having that thought process behind it where he had that consistently throughout the game from what I could see.
I like the way that you said purposeful. That's a really good way to put it. It's a succinct way to put it where there were there was purpose behind his decisions. I think the purpose of him driving to the basket and seeing how the Clippers were defending it and kicking it out to Lowry Markin in the ice. The game, like you said, I think that unlocks a dimension for the Cavs offense. But Mac, let's put a pin in this conversation. We'll come back with some awards, but I want to give a quick word from today's first sponsor at Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution and eating right thanks to Built Bar. It's almost like it's having a New Year's resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? And if you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. It's so good. These are going to be your new favorite, and I promise you that. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, like I said, Puffs included. 100% real chocolate. They're low-calorie, high-protein, and they replace candy bars with ease. They're better. A typical candy bar can be found anywhere to have 200 to 300 calories, and Built Bars mostly contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 14 grams of protein. And if you don't believe it for yourself, go to BuiltBar.com right now and scroll down to their macro charts. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calories, high fiber, low carbs. And if you compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories and 30 grams of sugar and dozens of net carbs, you'll see the difference right away. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. So if you're interested, go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Welcome back, and thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts, including this bozo. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said in the last segment, if this happens to be your first time listening to the show, I am Evan Dammarell. My usual co-host, Chris Manning, is a huge BTS stan and is out tonight. Joining me is 92.3 The Fan's Mac Robinson. But in the second segment of every recap show, we usually give out an MVP, a play of the night, a stat of the night award, etc. Matt, let's start with you. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with MVP, play of the night, stat of the night? Where do you want to start with?
Let's go play of the night because I could see a trend between our plays of the night for tonight.
Okay, well, tell me your play of the night, my man.
Mine, I will say this. I was very tempted to put Isaac Okoro's block at the end of the third quarter. I wanted to put that one in here. But no, I went with a different block instead because apparently it was a block party at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse tonight. So I went with the Evan Mobley block on Zubac at the beginning of overtime. I just felt like that really energized the crowd. Really energized the team at that point, and overall, I think that really led that charge through the overtime.
No, that's a really good pick. And Evan Mobley's had a lot of highlight plays this year, and Joe Varden from The Athletic asked him if that was one of Mobley. He asked Mobley if that was one of his favorite plays so far in his rookie season. He said it was. He said it was one of his best plays in his professional career. Would you agree with that? I feel like the dunk on Giannis is up there, but that was such an emphatic block, and you could feel Mobley taking his offense, and I say this after every game, but you could feel him taking his game to the next level with that block.
Yeah, and that was the one thing is that I feel like this game, in and of itself, it felt like a coming out party, if you can even really call it that, because every single game it feels like is similar to that for Evan Mobley. But, it really showcased every aspect of his game that I think that we've seen to this point, and really the potential that he can get to, especially on the offensive end. But, on that play especially, I remember just focusing on Zubac and thinking, all right, they're going to get a dunk, quick turnaround, and just Evan Mobley out of nowhere. I just didn't even expect him to be able to block that one. So that one definitely is up there for me.
I think it's a fair pick. We might have to let the Twitter masses, the wonderful place that is Twitter.com, decide for us. But my play is also a block, and I mentioned it in the first segment, but it's Brandon Goodwin's block on BJ Boston. I didn't expect him to have that kind of verticality or to play without that kind of fear, but Isaac Okoro said post-game he plays with zero fear. Yeah, it's just my play of the night pick, man. I think it was the play that really sparked the Cavs in the second half. They're kind of trading punches with the Clippers, but you could really feel the momentum shifting to their side of the court. And then it just snowballed effect. And then it rolled into overtime. And then the Cavs really put the Clippers away in OT. But I think a lot of it started with Goodwin getting that block on Boston.
Yeah, and I will say this: that probably would have been my third pick, but I noticed that you wanted it, so I was like, you know what, I'll go ahead.
What a good co-host.
I'll let Evan handle this one. I'll will take the Evan Mobley block. I'll let you go ahead and Evan take over the Brandon Goodwin one. So,
Well, I appreciate that, buddy. But let's shift ahead. What is yours? Where do you want to go next? MVP or stat of the night?
let's go Saturday night. Let's let the listener hold on for a little bit for MVP.
Okay, I like the way you think. What's your stat of the night pick?
So my stat of the night, actually, it was a split from Darius Garland. His first 22 minutes, shot 0 for 4 from the field, including 0 of 2 from deep, and only had 5 assists, 0 points. His last 23 minutes of the game, played 45 minutes total, shot 8 of 17 from the floor, including 4 of 7 from deep, had 8 assists and 24 points. So pretty much completely flipped his game script at that point, and really it felt like that was the key push when it came to this Cavaliers team, because especially too with him playing above where he's used to when it comes to that minute, his minutes that he's normally getting every night. You know, for him being up around 45, 46 minutes and playing that well at the back half of it, I think that was extremely key for the Cavaliers.
You know, it really is interesting because when you jotted this down just kind of on our impromptu script / notepad that we have running for this game, I'm like, that's actually a really good statistic to point out because for the better part of the game, for the first half at least, it felt like Garland was just having a standard issue Garland game, but he like wasn't having like a huge impact. And then the last 23 minutes, including overtime, I think he played the entire overtime period. Like he was red hot, he was locked in. I think he just does Darius Garland things. And Chris always tells me that we didn't expect him to be at this level. We expected some type of growth and like huge leap heading into his third year. But man, it's so cool to watch him just kind of reach these new heights every single game. That's just thing. Like this Cavs team's cool. Like they're cool.
Yeah.
They have fun.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that, you know, you're absolutely right. Like coming in, it was that general sense that all of us kind of had when it came to Darius, was that, you know, you felt like there was a leap that was coming. And, you know, I know I pointed this out on the station too, but, you know, last year going into, or if you look at the splits pre and post All-Star break, you know, last year before the All-Star break, he was averaging 16 points a game, a little under 6 assists, and he was shooting 52% true shooting percentage. After the All-Star break, that went up to 19 points a game, up to 6.5 assists, and his true shooting percentage went up 5%, up to 57%. Now, all of a sudden, you're seeing Darius take that, basically that stat line that he had in the second half. That's what he had pre-All-Star break. Now you're seeing him take that second leap. So I feel like we've already saw a preview of that last year. Now I think we're getting that next step as well, which I didn't expect him to, you know, not only consistently play like that for that leap, I didn't expect him to be able to take it to that next step at this point now where he's taking that even higher.
No, it really is unexpected. And speaking of unexpected, to kind of go with my stat of the night pick, first off, Isaac Okoro's free throw attempts. I think it's just encouraging in him to see him use that physicality. I think it's something that Chris, myself, you, plenty of others are kind of like noticed with Colin Sexton, where that was like the next phase in his offensive game is using that physicality and aggressiveness to draw contact, get the opposing team in foul trouble, and get him to the free throw line. Like it's a good thing, and he made the majority of them, which is also encouraging because like Isaac Okoro is a streaky shooter. But Mac, can you believe this was Cleveland's first overtime game of the season?
Yeah,
I didn't know that till the team account said it. I was like, "There's no way," and I'm like scrolling through. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it actually is."
Yeah, I know. And that's why, like, I almost took it for granted because, again, like, with all of the nights that, you know, you and I have been at the field house and, you know, getting to watch the games at home and in the state and at the station, everything like that, I never really took that into account. I kind of just had it like clockwork, like, all right, game's going to get done maybe 2.5 hours, post game, maybe another half hour or so afterward, and then we'll be done. But, like, you know, again, with the overtime aspect of it, it's almost like, again, we talked about with Darius Garland, you know, pushing all of these players into an aspect that they're not necessarily used to. And the fact that they played very well, given the fact that, you know, again, they're not used to that their minutes being stretched like that. So, at this point, I think that's another test for the Cavaliers that they're really passing at this point.
No, they really are passing it. And before we head into our next break, we've been teasing this for a little bit here, but my MVP pick is Evan Mobley, career high 30 points. Really, really played toughly through the physicality that the Clippers kind of threw at him. I think JV Bickerstaff said that that's the next step in his offensive game, is just him learning to play through this physicality and also kind of being forced to play the five while Jared Allen is out with broken middle finger on his left hand. Yeah, no, just by and far Cleveland's best young prospect, I'd still say. That's really hard to say though, because Allen and Garland are nobody you should sneeze at either. But Mobley was incredible tonight. But Mac, who's your pick?
My pick, because like I said, again, you picked Mobley, so I was like, I'm not going to go ahead, I'm not going to double up. And for me, I thought it was Isaac Okoro. I know that we talked about him quite a bit, but again, his aggressiveness, and you said it in your stat of the night. I mean, 13 free throw attempts for him tonight. Shot 4 of 6 from the floor, 1 of 2 from deep. He was efficient and he was aggressive in getting to the basket. And on top of that, too, like you said, playing with 4 personal fouls throughout the game, obviously in a little bit of foul trouble, but still being able to, show off that aggressiveness and being able to play the defensive end. And, as JB likes to call it again, he just was scrapping on the defensive end to get a lot of those rebounds. So I think that Isaac Okoro really stepped up and showed out for me tonight.
Just Coach Mac Robinson there for everybody, folks. But let's put a pin in this conversation one last time. Mac has a topic he'd like to discuss with me, but we might clear it in our notebooks as well. But I want to give you one more word from today's other sponsor, our friends at BetOnline. It's that time of year again as March Madness is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and all your favorite Vegas casino games as well. So, if you're interested, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Welcome back to the final segment of today's Locked On Cavs, where I am Evan Dammarell. I'm joined by 92.3 The Fans, Mac Robinson, the Bat Mac, if you will. Mac, did you have any other major or even minor takeaways from Monday's game that you want to talk about?
I felt like, and I mentioned this at the beginning too, but I felt like this was when it came to the aggressiveness of this team, I feel like that this was turned up to 11 for the first time that I can remember since that you would kind of expect in early December, again, with, Ricky Rubio being on the team and everything like that. You felt like the offense was there. At least a little bit more frequent than obviously than we've seen recently. But the other part of this too is that, I want to say that I was a little concerned, and I know that you mentioned him as your MVP. I was a little concerned on the defensive end. I know that everybody's going to point out the stats and look, it's phenomenal, but I'm a little bit concerned with Mobley and the interior of the defense, because it felt like he was really getting attacked by Zubac quite a bit. On the interior down low. I know he had a few blocks, obviously, but that was a little concerning to me. But, overall, obviously happy with the win. And then a couple of other things, too. Like I said, I love what I saw from Levert, and I feel optimistic given what we saw from Dylan Windler as well. Because, again, I just feel like when it comes to this team and what they've done throughout this season, I think that it's been largely due to a lot of those role players really stepping up. And, Windler's been somebody who, I talked about it with Jackson Flickinger last weekend, at the Charge games, and the fact that, Windler has a knack for finding the ball and just didn't understand it, didn't know how, but literally just look down at the stat sheet, and he's up to like 12 rebounds in like 20 minutes.
Do that all the time at Belmont, man. And Trevor Magnotti, he was a draft scout and friend of ours, friend of the pod. I'm sure you've spoken to him a few times too, Mr. Legal Screens himself on Twitter. He said if Windler doesn't have anything translate to the next level, his rebounding will for sure, because look at his senior numbers at Belmont when he was averaging like 13 a game. He's just like, that's a skill you can't teach. He just has a nose for the ball for some reason.
Yeah, and that's why, like, again, those kind of winning plays are what earn you minutes. And on top of that, too, like you said, I mean, we've been looking for him to be more aggressive, and seeing him get after the ball, getting after some screens, and the plays without the ball in his hands. I think that he really succeeded there. And one little footnote too is Lauri Markkanen too. I know I mentioned it before, but just the efficiency that he played with and being able to shoot well, I was really happy and pleased with what I was able to see out of Lauri.
No, I think was more impressive than anything is he played 46 minutes, I think, off the top of my head tonight.
Yeah.
And you can notice at times I think the ankle was bothering him a little bit. And he really had some gutty rebounds that kept the Cavs in a lot of possessions or just kind of closed things out for them. Like people were questioning why Isaac Okoro didn't get the junkyard dog chain, which I love. That's kind of just become like a fan point of interest going forward. But I think Markkanen deserves it. He's not going to get many opportunities, let's be frank. But this was a good game for him. I think him kind of playing through some adversity he was facing personally or physically, I should rather say, really speaks volumes and maybe how this Cavs team kind of holds each other accountable and they don't want to let each other down, which is really cool. And just for me, my note is I talked about the Clippers earlier. Like, they're surprisingly deep. Like Ty Lue is just really squeezing blood out of a stone, like every ounce of blood from this stone. And if this Clippers team is healthy, if Kawhi Leonard is 100% right, if Paul George is 100% right coming into next season, like they're really going to give Phoenix a push in the Western Conference. And because I don't know what the Lakers are going to do. They're just an aberration. And the Clippers are just like a very well run organization and very well coached. They have a ton of good role players. Like Reggie Jackson's really good too. Like the Clippers are fun. And I think I monitor them closely just because I like Ty personally and for what he did in Cleveland. I think it was nice to see him get a huge standing ovation from the home crowd and then watch Kevin Love seek him out and give him a big bear hug on the sideline. That was cool. But my biggest takeaway from looking at this G-Dang Clippers roster, they should have kept Isaiah Hartenstein because right now the Cavs could use some center depth. Like, no disrespect to Ed Davis, but Ed Davis is 3 years older than me and my girlfriend's dad because I pulled something Saturday night. Then walking down the steps Sunday morning, he's like, "Evan, you're walking older than I look." And her dad's in his mid-50s, but like my calf was real tight. I watch Ed Davis play, and I'm like, "You play older than I look out there." And like, I'm not the most in shape person, but Isaiah Hartenstein's just such an intriguing player to me. Former G League MVP. He can pass. He can sometimes shoot. He can rebound. He can block. He has a propensity for fouls, and I think JB Bickerstaff kind of knowing that from coaching Isaiah because Bickerstaff's also said he wishes they could have kept Hartenstein too, but he knows it's the business. But it was really smart of Bickerstaff to when he saw Hartenstein out there and they pulled Zubac because Zubac was in foul trouble. He's like, okay, let's just keep putting pressure on Hartenstein then. So he put Markkanen and Love out there and said either Hartenstein has to be dragged out to the perimeter to defend one of these two, or he's going to overcommit and foul because I think it was Garland, Levert, and Okoro on the floor with him. He's like, one of these three are going to attack the basket and he's going to foul them. And it was smart and it was right. But Mac, let's talk about injuries.
Mm-hmm.
You texted me about this earlier. We were planning a little bit because Locked On Cavs is a professional production, and we really plan everything out. So for the last few minutes, let's talk about it. Do you think injuries are limiting the ceiling of this Cavs team, or do you? Because I'm conflicted on this, and I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I've had this thought for a little while now, and it really kind of hammered home once Jared Allen got injured. But for me, I felt like the biggest concern that I had was, once Charis Levert got hurt coming out of the break and he started missing games, there was a few missed games from Garland. Obviously, he's looking great now at this point. But, once Levert was out for 9 games, you had Rondo. You still have Rondo in and out of the lineup, missing time. Now you've got Jared Allen who's missing time. I worry about the chemistry of this team at this point and kind of getting the feel for each other and understanding the different lineups. And with, not necessarily all at once, but it feels like it's just a string of injuries where once you get somebody back, somebody else is getting knocked out of the lineup. So for me, it's understanding what lineups you want to roll with. And because of the fact that you're missing so many key elements of that, I worry about the lineups and those players getting a chance to get a feel for each other and where they like it on the court, to where I have concerns about just how high of a ceiling this team can have this season because of that lack of experience of playing with each other on the court, because you really can't replicate that in practice.
So are you saying the perceived ceiling is just where they're at post All-Star break or so? Because when I first read this text, I'm like, well, my ceiling for this Cavs team was literally a couple inches off the ground, and then they shatter that ceiling, keep building a new one every step of the way.
Right.
But I agree with you. I think I'm not in regards to the Allen injury, I'm not overly concerned because he had like instantaneous chemistry with Darius Garland. I think it's only gotten stronger over time. I think Hay and Mobley have kind of figured out how to play with one another. That's still a work in progress. Ditto for Markin. I think it's just objectively tough to put 3, 6, 11 to 7 foot guys on the floor at the same time, and spacing issues notwithstanding. Like if Markkanen's hot, it makes it easier. If Mobley's able to hit a couple threes, I think it makes it easier. Allen thrives in the paint, and that's where it's difficult. The Levert aspect, and I touched on this a little bit, I think there's going to be a bit of a delay just chemistry wise with him because he's missed so much time, and it's just crucial time right now for him to just kind of play catch up and build familiarity. But like you saw, encouraging glimpses of it possibly working down the stretch against the Clippers tonight. But other than that, like the Rondo factor, also a little concerning. I agree with that too, or it limits just maybe some of the role players thriving in aspects. I think not having Rondo out there really limits Jetty Osmond's viability because you're asking Jetty to be more of a gunner off the bench now, and you can't get him a guy who can get him easier looks because I know Ricky Rubio's no longer with his team. He may come back in the offseason as a veteran free agent signing, but one of his biggest contributions, other than just being no fear on offense when he would shoot 3-pointers, is he got Jetty Osmond some of the cleanest looks in his young career other than playing with LeBron. And that's back when Jetty was more of a hustle defense guy and hardly shot the ball. And it's weird how the script is flipped on him. Just thinking that out loud right now. But Rondo is kind of trying to provide the same role as Rubio and just trying to get Jetty clean looks. He's trying to get Kevin Love clean looks. So I think Kevin having more familiarity with Darius Garland, I think JB sticking to playing big is helping a lot too. And I think he trusts Kevin a lot more as well. But I do have concerns with the lack of Rondo at times because it would be tough to watch this cast team kind of self-combust in the playoffs because it's a different beast. And yeah, you have his veteran presence in the locker room and in young players' ears, but like having him on the court as a coach does volumes for this team too. And I think that's the biggest thing they're missing because this is a high intensity game against the Clippers tonight. Yes, the Cavs found a way to win, but it was still tough for them. Like I think maybe having a couple extra veteran voices or adults in the room, as BTS stan Chris Manning would say, really does pay dividends for what this Cavs team is trying to accomplish at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I guess I should also clarify too, when it comes to my thoughts on the ceiling of this team, I don't think that. And
Buddy, I was just teasing you, by the way. That's all.
Oh, I know. But again, I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying for the audience. Again,
that's fair.
I look at this team and I feel like that they can make my absolute high point for them that I would absolutely love for them to do is I want them to win their round 1 matchup and I want them to push in round 2. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for, at least when it comes to.
I think that's my ceiling for them too.
Yeah. And I think that because out of anything, and I think that we've learned this from, seeing those Cavs playoff runs with LeBron, you can have the superstars, but at the same time, it's the Tristan Thompsons, it's the Darren Williams, it's, those role players that really get that really take your team above and beyond. And a couple of those,
made a face at Darren Williams because he didn't show up until like game 2 of the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean a little bit.
Maybe the J.R. Smiths and the Amon.
Yeah, J.R. Smith. Thank you. Yeah. Darren Williams throwing that out there. I mean, hey, shout out to you in your next boxing match. But I look at those players and I think that those ones, and even Channing Frye's a good example too against Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Where those guys will win you a couple of those games. So. For me, it's about getting those guys in the right spaces and having those guys be able to be ready to perform, especially when a lot of these guys are younger. I mean, obviously, Jetty had the couple of or the one run, I think it was in 2018. That was it when they brought him in. So, he's only had one playoff run. Brandon Goodwin obviously is new to this. Charis Levert obviously has some experience with Brooklyn as well, but, really didn't get as much because of the trade. But, I think that with a lot of this roster being on the younger side, I want to make sure that, again, you have that chemistry going in so that you're kind of you won't be prepared for the playoffs until you get there. You don't have that experience until you get there. But at the same time, just having those guys prepared and understanding where players like to have the ball in their spots, understanding where that's at, that's where I think that, I look at this as limiting the ceiling a little bit to where I wonder how they would fare if they were able to get to round 2.
I think that's just something we gotta kind of keep monitoring and just keep an eye on going forward. But that's going to have to do it for Mac and I today. We're going to have him on again just to talk about it. Mac, thank you again for just kind of being available on such short notice. Chris and his K-pop fandom is just it's an interesting wrinkle, and I'm going to run this joke into the ground. But before we go, Mac, tell everyone where they can find you on social. Clearly, your handle if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't yet. It's right below you. But tell everyone where they can find you and share what you've been working on, my man.
Well, first, I just want to go ahead and say I understand that the hustle is difficult when it comes to the BTS stand. So I understand that Chris is working his way back. But you guys can go ahead and find my stuff on Twitter at MacRobinson95. I've been filling in hosting over at The Fan as well, but I'm also going to be covering Cavs games as well. I'll be retweeting my stuff on the station. I'll be covering the game on Wednesday as well as on Friday against Denver.
So excited to have Mac in the press box with me again.
Buddy. I know it's going to be the fun row again. But yeah, so
you, me, Marissa McNeese. It's gonna be a fun time. Maybe Chris, if he's feeling up to it.
I'm glad two of us are able to be on the podcast.
Yeah, there we go. What the heck? But Marissa knows what she did. That's why she can't be on the show right now.
Exactly. But shame on her.
Shame on her. But thanks again for coming on, brother. And thank you all for listening to Locked On Cavs and making it your first listen every day. Later this week, Chris and I will be talking about Cleveland's jam-packed week in general and his time at the BTS show. But now, make your second listen Locked On NBA. The Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Probably the same spot you're listening to Locked On Cavs.